You can either bury your mother, or you can close the funding round. But you can't do both. That's what she said. Word for word. Milamy's sister-in-law, my CEO, and apparently the final judge of whether grief was a valid excuse for absence, looked me straight in the eye and said that. No hesitation, no empathy. Just a calendar invite and a shrug. It was 2 days after the machine stopped beeping. 2 days since, I'd watched my mom take her final breath in a dimly lit hospital room that still smelled like antiseptic and cold fear. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. But I had shown up because I thought family, at the very least, meant something to her. I was wrong. She tapped her Apple Pencil against her tablet, slid the Q3 burn rate numbers across the glass table, and said it again slower this time, as if I were hard of hearing or just fragile. The funeral or the funding? Pick one. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My heart had already cracked, but now it splintered clean through. My brother Noah sat in the corner, avoiding my eyes. Silent. Spineless. His loyalty had clearly found a new home. I stood there, holding a crumpled folder in my hands, the one that held the obituary I wrote at 3:00 a.m. while my mother was dying, and realized something I probably should have understood years ago. I wasn't part of this family anymore. Not the company. Not the legacy. Not even the grief. Just a liability. A footnote. A calendar conflict they wanted to erase. So I walked out. Not in a blaze of fury. Not in tears. But in silence. Because sometimes silence says everything. Have you ever been forced to choose between family and work? What did you do? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. What they didn't know was that I wasn't walking away empty-handed. The chapel was quiet. Too quiet. You always imagine funerals filled with whispers and sniffles, maybe the gentle creak of old pews under familiar weight, but this one felt hollow, like grief had slipped out the side door and taken most of the mourners with it. The organist played a soft hymn, something my mother used to hum while pruning the garden. But without voices around me, even the melody sounded off like a recording played in the wrong key. I sat in the front row with one hand clutched around the edge of a folded tissue, the other resting gently on the program. Her photo stared back at me, smiling, vibrant, wrapped in that soft green scarf I bought her last spring. The woman in the picture deserved a packed room. Instead, I could count the attendees on both hands. 5 rows behind me, a neighbor from childhood waved a sympathetic glance. Next to her, our old mail carrier. A retired nurse who cared for Mom during her first round of chemo. And that was it. No board members. No colleagues. Not even Noah. The same Noah who used to chase me through the aisles of this very church when we were kids. The same Noah who couldn't even be bothered to text. But Mila? Mila made sure to send an automated message from her assistant. On behalf of Miss Carter, please accept our sincere condolences during this difficult time. Due to scheduling conflicts, she will not be attending. Scheduling conflicts. I stared down at my hands, still raw from folding programs at 2 a.m. My nails chipped. My shoulders tight. I hadn't had time to process the loss. I hadn't even had time to cry. The priest cleared his throat, nodding toward me. It was time. I rose slowly, the tissue still clenched in my fist, and walked to the podium. My heels clicked against the stone floor each step a little too loud in the silence. I unfolded the paper. The eulogy I had written while sitting beside a hospital bed, listening to machines beep slower and slower. My mother believed in small kindnesses. I began, voice thin but steady. She baked cookies for the mailman. She left notes in my lunchbox until I graduated college. And when I told her I was joining the company, she whispered, "Just promise me you'll remember who you are when the job forgets." A lump tightened in my throat. She always knew this place could change people, but she believed I'd be the exception. I paused. From the corner of my eye, I saw someone shift. The mail carrier wiped a tear. That almost undid me. But I kept going. She taught me that silence can be kind, but it should never be confused with permission. That just because people treat you like you're small doesn't mean you are. My voice cracked on that line. I folded the paper and stepped back, heart pounding in the quiet that followed. No one moved. No applause, no sniffles. Just stained glass saints looking down with knowing eyes. Afterward, I lingered near the altar, arranging the wilting lilies the florist had delivered late. I overheard two women chatting by the door, whispers meant to sound harmless. She's stepping down, apparently. Mila told the board already. Probably for the best. Like I was a project being phased out. My jaw clenched. My hands trembled slightly as I straightened the last petal. They were moving on. No, they'd been moving on. The minute my mother's monitor flatlined, I'd become an inconvenience. Not a daughter in mourning. Just a scheduling problem. And somewhere deep inside, something began to change. Not rage, not revenge. But something sharper, quieter, stronger. And it would wait. Just long enough. It was nearly midnight when my phone rang. At first, I thought it was a spam call. The number was unfamiliar, just a string of digits glowing against the dark. I was sitting alone at the kitchen table, the house too quiet, the air too heavy. My mother's perfume still lingering faintly on her cardigan draped over the back of the chair beside me. I hesitated, then I answered. Miss Blake? Yes? This is Joseph Linden. I was your mother's estate attorney. His voice was calm, clipped, older. He didn't ask how I was doing. I appreciated that. She left something for you. Not part of the will. It's private. She asked that it be discussed away from the board. The board? Of Lunaris. Why? Because, Miss Blake, not everything was meant to be shared. I sat straighter, the ache in my spine forgotten. My fingers gripped the edge of the table. You'll want to come by tomorrow, he added. Bring ID and time. When the call ended, I stayed frozen for a few moments. Then I reached across the table for the worn manila folder with my mother's obituary and the eulogy I'd read hours earlier. I pressed my palm to it. A strange weight settled in my chest, not grief this time, but something more electric. Hope. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were scattered snippets of old board meetings, my mother's voice telling me to double-check the charter, the faint sound of her laughter behind the clatter of typewriter keys. By 9:00 a.m. I was seated across from Mr. Linden in a modest downtown office that smelled faintly of paper and lemon oil. He wore a gray suit and bifocals and slid a black binder across the table. You'll want to read page 27, he said. I opened it. The language was legal, tight, precise. And there it was, highlighted in yellow ink, under a section labeled Contingency Provisions for Founding Members. In the event that any direct descendant of a founding member is denied reasonable bereavement leave, full executive voting privileges shall be transferred to the aforementioned descendant until an ethics review is completed. I blinked, then blinked again. My brain struggled to connect what I was reading to what I thought I understood about our company's governance. This was never in the operational charter, I said quietly. Linden nodded. It was filed with the founding documents, but not included in the distributed summaries. Your mother updated it quietly after a disagreement with the board 5 years ago. She never told them. Why would she? Because she knew, he said. Eventually, someone would try to erase you. I looked up. His face was calm, unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, recognition, maybe. Or respect. I flipped the page. There was a second clause. Dated just last year, her handwriting in the margins, shakier but still distinct. A single note beside the update read, If they silence her, this will speak. I sat back in my chair. For the first time since the hospital, I felt something settle in me. Not rage, not vindication. Clarity. She had seen this coming. All of it. And she had written me back into the story before they even tried to erase me from it. The sky was still gray when I pulled into the lot behind the storage facility. A faded sign reading, Evervault, Climate, Controlled Units. since 1992 hung lopsided over the entrance. No one else was around. Just the steady drizzle of early spring tapping against the windshield and the hum of fluorescent lights flickering to life behind the front office glass. The woman at the desk looked half asleep when I walked in. I gave her my name. She blinked, then pulled out a clipboard, passed it across the counter, and gestured vaguely down the hall. Unit 123. You've got access for the hour. No questions. No signature required. Someone had clearly set this up in advance. The hallway smelled of dust and cardboard. Rows of locked doors lined either side, each with a number stenciled in black. The wheels of my boots echoed softly on the concrete floor. Unit 123 was toward the back, tucked between an unused shelving bay and a broken vending machine with a cracked, out-of-order sticker peeling off the screen. I inserted the key Joseph Linden had given me and turned it slowly. The bolt clicked. The door rolled up with a groan. Inside, it was nothing like I expected. No clutter. No stacks of old furniture or family heirlooms. Just one folding table, 2 filing cabinets, and a single black briefcase placed precisely in the center. It was older, the kind of hard-shell IBM case that hadn't been manufactured in decades. A yellowed tag hung from the handle. Rowan, for your hands only. I sat down slowly, heart thudding in my chest. The latches snapped open with a sharp click. Inside, neat manila folders, a few original blueprints of the company's founding structure, and right in the middle-y red folder labeled Founders Charter. Addendum clauses. Updated 2022. My hands trembled as I pulled it free. Each page inside was handwritten. My mother's penmanship. Carefully formed letters in dark ink, underlined headers, small notes in the margins. Her style hadn't changed in 20 years. It was as if she'd sat down one day, maybe with pain in her bones, and too many IVs in her arm and written it out by sheer force of will. Page after page detailed ownership language, ethical triggers, fail-safes, and provisions that no one had ever talked about in board meetings. And then, I found it again. The clause Joseph had mentioned, but this time, in her own handwriting. With a new section added. If the descendant in question is denied due process, humane bereavement leave, or otherwise targeted with exclusionary behavior in contradiction to founder ethics, said, descendant is to assume interim authority pending internal review. Effective immediately upon notice. Underneath. In her own cursive. They'll forget what we agreed to. That's why I'm writing it down. My throat tightened. I sat with the folder in my lap for what felt like an hour, though it was probably minutes. It wasn't just a clause. It was a lifeline. A message sent across time, through illness and silence, reminding me that I wasn't crazy. That what happened in that conference room wasn't just cruel, it was unethical. And that my mother, despite being stripped of her title and squeezed out of the company's narrative, had never stopped protecting mine. The lights above flickered once. I closed the case, locked it again, and stood. Whatever came next. I wasn't walking in empty-handed anymore. I didn't make a dramatic return to the office. No cold stares across the boardroom. No slam of a door or a fiery monologue. Instead, I walked into Lunaris HQ like I had 100 times before, coffee in one hand, laptop bag slung over my shoulder, the morning fog of Portland still clinging to my coat. No one looked twice. Not even Mila's assistant, who gave me a polite nod as I passed reception. Grief, it turns out, makes a great disguise. I took the elevator to the 11th floor, stepped into the quiet of my office still labeled Product Advisor instead of co-founder, and shut the door behind me. Then I locked it. I placed the red folder on my desk, flipped it open, and reread the clause in my mother's handwriting. Every word still hit like a steady drumbeat. Effective immediately upon notice. Notice. That was the trigger. I already knew who I needed. Morgan Tappan, my mother's longtime corporate attorney. Someone who understood that power didn't always need to stage it, just needed precision. I'd last seen him at her retirement celebration 3 years ago. He'd worn a navy suit and carried a stack of documents like armor. We never spoke more than a few words, but I remembered how her shoulders always relaxed when he walked into the room. I emailed him that morning. The subject line was one word. Clause. The body. Available to meet today. Confidential. He responded 7 minutes later. By noon, I was sitting across from him in a quiet legal suite 3 blocks from the courthouse. He read the clause twice, lips pressed in a flat line. Well, he said, this changes things. He walked me through the engagement process. No drama, just a series of cold signatures on warm paper. We'll file a motion with the state business registrar by close of business, he said. It's not aggressive, it's procedural. Clean, quiet, but legally binding. Clean, quiet, just like she wanted. By 6 p.m., the notice was officially recorded on the state portal. A 3-sentence directive filed under shareholder protections. Per Clause 3. 4 of the Founders' Charter, I, Rowan Blake, am invoking interim authority due to ethical breach. All executive decisions are to be suspended pending internal review. No emotion. No threats. No signature, flourish. Just facts. At 5:11 p.m., I composed an internal email. No greeting. No sign-off. Just the sentence. As of this afternoon, all executive actions require a hold until review under Clause 3.4 is complete. I copied the legal department and hit send. Then I sat back in my chair and exhaled for the first time in days. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was a shift. A pressure change in the air. Somewhere upstairs, Mila's inbox was lighting up. Her phone buzzing. Her schedule unraveling. And I knew she'd be reading that clause again and again, trying to remember who had signed it. And when the truth is on your side, do you strike loud or move in silence? Let me know how you'd play it. Comment your answer below. Back at my desk, the office lights dimmed slightly for evening mode. Outside the window, the city moved on like nothing had changed. But everything had. The quarterly board meeting at Lunaris always started at exactly 9:00 a.m. Never a minute early. Never a minute late. That morning, I arrived at 8:57. I didn't wear black. I didn't wear gray. I wore navy clean, sharp, assertive. The kind of color that says, I'm done apologizing. As I stepped into the elevator, a few junior employees nodded politely. One offered a faint smile, probably unsure if I was still in or out after the funeral. I gave nothing back. Just a quiet nod, the same way my mother used to when she was preparing to say something that would change a room. The doors opened on the 20th floor. It was always colder up here, as if success required refrigeration. Inside the boardroom, Mila was already seated at the head of the table. Her tablet lay flat in front of her, fingers poised like she was ready to conduct an orchestra no one else had been invited to join. To her left, my brother Noah, eyes fixed on a bottle of water like it held answers he couldn't face. To her right, Elliot Kim, the newest board member, young, eager, and still unsure which way the wind blew. No one offered me a seat, so I took one near the window. Quietly, deliberately. A chair that was once mine by default, now reclaimed by choice. Mila didn't look up. She tapped her screen, and the first slide flashed onto the wall. Revenue forecasts. User growth. Strategic acquisitions. The same script as always. Only this time, the lines weren't going to follow her direction. A knock at the door. All heads turned as Thomas Lynn, General Counsel, stepped inside. He held a single envelope bearing the Lunaris seal. No greeting, no small talk. Just a walk across the room, and a quiet placement of the envelope in front of Mila. She opened it. Her shoulders stiffened before her face did. For the first time in years, I watched her lose her place. The room fell still. Thomas cleared his throat. Per legal filing dated yesterday, and executed under Clause 3.4 of the Founders' Charter, executive voting privileges are hereby suspended pending ethics review. The notice was filed by co-founder Rowan Blake. The silence that followed had weight, like it might crack the windows. Noah looked up, startled. Elliot blinked rapidly. Mila smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "This is symbolic," she said, her voice like polished steel. "Nothing more." I leaned forward slightly. Apparently, symbolic founders can still file legally binding notices. I slid a copy of the clause across the table. The gold seal shimmered under the overhead lights. Elliot reached for it. His eyes scanned the wording, then darted to Mila. "She's still listed as a founding executive," he murmured. "That's binding." Mila's fingers began tapping against the tabletop. A rapid rhythm. A code only she understood. Or maybe just a reflex. A loss of control disguised as composure. No one said anything else. The slide on the wall hung awkwardly, projecting bar graphs that no one was looking at anymore. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, letting the weight of the room shift. Letting the silence speak. Because sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is show up with the truth. And let it land. The glass walls of Lunaris always made it feel like there were no secrets. But I knew better. Transparency was branding, not practice. After the board meeting, the whispers began. Subtle, careful, but they were there. A few lingering glances in the hallway. A conversation that hushed when I entered the break room. Elliot stopped me outside the elevator and said, almost too casually, "If you ever want to look deeper, I'd start with the travel fund." That was all I needed. I didn't go back to my office. Instead, I took the long way around through the lower levels, where the infrastructure team worked, and slipped into the data compliance lab tucked behind a door labeled Facilities Overflow. Inside, the air was cooler. The lights dimmer, the hum of servers pulsed like a heartbeat. And sitting at a desk in the corner, with 2 monitors glowing blue, was Taryn Ross. Taryn had been at Lunaris almost as long as I had. Former White Hat, cybersecurity engineer, brilliant, sarcastic, and famously underpaid. She didn't look up when I entered, just raised an eyebrow and kept typing. "You're 3 years late," she said. "For what?" "For realizing the walls have microphones and the spreadsheets have ghosts." I didn't smile. Just handed her a USB and said, "I need you to find everything hidden in the shadows. And I need you to do it like I was never here." She paused, then turned her chair fully toward me. "Executive privilege? Founder level? Encrypted assets? Highly. Budget code? Backdated travel reimbursements? Anything with red flags or familiar last names?" Taryn cracked her knuckles. "Give me an hour." I nodded and left without another word. Back upstairs, I kept my face neutral and sipped bad coffee like nothing was shifting underneath our feet. But something was. I could feel it. The quiet tension before a storm, not loud yet, but growing. Exactly 61 minutes later, I got a text. "Found your ghosts. Bring a drive. Come alone." I met her in one of the unused collaboration rooms. Conference Room D, the one we used to hide from all company town halls. Taryn had already scrubbed the logs, masked the access. On her laptop, 3 folders pulsed on screen. She walked me through them without ceremony. The first. Over $2. $4 million in first-class flights charged to the advisory travel budget. Destinations included Florence, Jackson Hole, and a private resort in St. Bart's, none of which had been mentioned in investor briefings. The second. Consulting fees $6-7 million, routed through a company named Stratus Horizon, operated by a man named Wesley Carter. Mila's cousin. The third folder. Internal expense reports listing high-end designer bags, spa treatments, and bizarrely seasonal home decor, coded under team development. RD. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight, but my voice calm. They hid this under what? Equipment lease reimbursements. They split the amounts, buried them in quarterly bulk uploads. Rookie tactics. Lazy. How long has it been going on? 5 years, minimum. And no one noticed? Oh, people noticed. They just stopped looking after a while. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not shock. Those had passed. This was something colder, more focused. Download everything, I said. Isolate the worst offenses. Strip metadata, move quietly. Taryn handed me a secure drive. You sure you're ready for this? No, I replied. But they should be. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. Not from adrenaline. Just calculation. My brain refused to quiet. Every hour was another detail to confirm, another paragraph to rewrite, another step in the process that had to be flawless. If I was going to do this, it had to be clean. Untraceable. Precise. At 2:41 a. I opened a blank folder on my encrypted drive and titled it Operation Garden Fire. The name came from an old saying my mother used to repeat when we were kids. If you want to save the roots, sometimes you burn the weeds. This was that fire. By 3:00 a.m. I had sorted every file Taryn gave me into categories: unauthorized travel, shell payments, false reimbursements, nepotistic contracts. Every spreadsheet was labeled, scrubbed, time stamped. I removed identifying metadata, embedded a checksum tracker, redacted personal employee info that didn't matter, left only what couldn't be ignored. I wanted facts, not drama, not vengeance, just truth, so loud it didn't need to scream. By sunrise, the report was done. 76 pages, 4 exhibits, 1 purpose. I saved the final version as a locked PDF, then renamed it Ethics Report Alpha PDF. A small, boring name for a very loud consequence. The company had implemented an anonymous whistleblower portal 3 years ago, after a seminar I personally designed. At the time, I believed in it, thought it could make us better. Irony is patient. It waits in the wings. I logged in through a private VPN. No trace. No location. The prompt blinked. Submit report. My cursor hovered over the button. Just a moment. Not hesitation, just gravity. Then a voice in my mind. Voice. They'll forget what we agreed to. That's why I'm writing it down. Click. The upload bar moved slow, like molasses in winter. Then, submission received. Thank you for helping us foster integrity. I almost laughed. Integrity was coming. Just not the way they planned. I exited the portal, cleared my session, and shut the laptop. Then I sat in the dark, staring at the glow of the city outside my window. It was quiet. Still. But underneath that stillness, I knew exactly what I'd done. I hadn't thrown a grenade. I'd just let gravity do its work. At 7:04 a.m., I received the first auto-response from the ethics team. Thank you. Your submission has been logged and routed for compliance triage. At 7:17, another. Escalated to external counsel review. By 8:00 a.m., Taryn texted me one line. It's moving. Fast. I got dressed in silence. No rush. No nerves. Just purpose. A navy blazer. Neutral makeup. No earrings. Today wasn't about looking polished. It was about being ready. In the mirror, I didn't see the girl who once begged for a voice at the table. I saw someone who no longer needed to raise her voice at all. It started with a whisper. A ripple that passed through the hallways of Lunaris like a chill wind. Quiet at first, just a few glances exchanged near the cafe, a few employees walking faster than usual between meetings. But by 9:00 a.m., it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a tremor. I entered the building as I always did. Calm, measured. Anonymous in the rhythm of the morning shuffle. The badge scanner lit green. No one stopped me. But I noticed the difference. Clusters of employees had formed near the espresso bar, eyes glued to their phones. Screens reflected across faces. Headlines. Tech firm under ethics investigation after anonymous report. Sources claim internal funds misused by executive team at Lunaris. My name wasn't on anything. But inside the walls, it was everywhere. I stepped into the elevator alone. No music played, just the faint hum of cables and the sound of my own heartbeat, steady now, not fast, not frantic. Just ready. On the 20H floor, the air was different. Tighter. Heavier. Outside the main boardroom, voices clashed through the glass. Who submitted this? How long has this been happening? There are names in here. Real names. Find out who leaked it. Today. And then Mila's voice, sharper than I'd ever heard it. This is fiction. It's staged. It's a trap. Funny how facts turn feral when you've spent years pretending they don't exist. I didn't stop to listen. Instead, I made my way down the side hall to compliance, where the real cleanup had already begun. Clara, the junior ethics officer, met me at the door, her expression caught somewhere between alarm and relief. They've frozen the advisory travel fund, she said softly, and flagged 3 vendor accounts for external audit. Including Stratus Horizon? I asked. Top of the list, she nodded. The paper trail to Mila's cousin is impossible to ignore. I walked with her to the observation room. Through the tinted glass, I could see Mila pacing the boardroom floor. Noah sat off to the side, arms crossed, face pale. A stack of printouts had landed hard at the center of the table, and a legal advisor I didn't recognize was flipping through them like a surgeon reading x-rays. A red light blinked on the wall. The investigation was now officially in motion. At 10:04, I received a private alert. Report Alpha escalated to level red. External counsel engaged. That's when the foundation shifted. The acquisition Mila had been pushing for? Paused. The quarterly performance bonuses? Frozen. Investor queries began pouring in by mid-morning, demanding transparency. Legal review boards filed for early access to documentation. Internal chats lit up with questions no one dared ask aloud 2 days ago. And Mila? Mila was unraveling. Bit by bit. Word by word. Frame by frame. She shouted at Clara outside the boardroom, demanding to know who had access to compliance logs. She called Elliot into a closed-door huddle. I passed them both in the hallway. Their conversation fell silent as I walked by. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Do you believe silence can bring down an empire? If you've ever watched something fall under its own weight, share your story in the comments. Some truths speak loudest when we say nothing at all. Back in my office, I closed the blinds and sat down at my desk. Outside, the world of Lunaris cracked at its surface. And he had never felt steadier. The envelope was ivory. Thick, smooth, the kind you only find in law offices or wedding invitations. It arrived by courier. No return address. No logo. Just my name in crisp black lettering and a red wax seal I hadn't seen in years, the same kind my mother used for holiday letters and handwritten thank you notes. The wax bore the imprint of a magnolia, her favorite tree. Inside, 1 page. Folded once, centered perfectly. I opened it with both hands, like I was holding breath. At the top was her handwriting, steady and sharp. Even at the end, she never let the tremors touch her pen. If you're reading this, the house is on fire. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to help you put it out, but I left water where you'd know to find it. Fight smart. Fight with dignity. You carry the story forward. Protect it. My throat tightened. Beneath the note was a notarized form. Legal. Ironclad. Signed 16 months ago, backdated to a time I barely remembered anymore. Before the second relapse, before the oxygen machines and wheelchairs. It was a transfer of voting shares. Specifically, a controlling block that had quietly been moved from the company's family trust previously under Mila's direction into a trust held by me. Triggered only in the event of substantiated ethical misconduct resulting in board review. It wasn't just a clause. It was a failsafe. One that only a mother could build. I leaned back in my chair, the page trembling slightly between my fingers. The sheer precision of it all. She hadn't just anticipated betrayal, she'd architected a response. Quiet, legal, invisible. And now, active. She'd watched it coming. Not just Mila's ambition, but the board's silence. The slow erasure. The shifting tides no one else had the courage to name out loud. And instead of fighting with fury, she fought with preparation. She made me harder to erase. For a long moment, I sat motionless, staring at the signature hers above mine, each stroke a kind of vow. I could almost hear her voice again, the way she said my name when she needed me to look up from my screen and see the world. She knew how they'd move. And she made sure I could move, too. I thought about the last dinner we had before she got sick again. A small bistro on Hawthorne. She barely touched her food, but she asked questions all night. About product strategy, culture ethics, employee retention. She didn't care about margins. She cared about people. And maybe, just maybe, she knew this would be the only way to ensure Lunaris remembered what it was built for. A company created by builders, not opportunists. And certainly not by anyone who would call a funeral a distraction. I set the envelope down carefully and opened my laptop. The legal contact for the trust, Harper Vincent, was already in my address book. I typed one line. Hi Harper, it's time. Let's initiate Clause 7C. He replied 4 minutes later. Your mother would be proud. I'll meet you at the courthouse at 9. The cursor blinked at the end of the message. For once, I didn't feel small. Not sentimental. Not shaken. Just aligned. And steady. The land was forgotten. 5 acres of cracked concrete and overgrown weeds tucked behind a shuttered delivery center on the east side of Portland. No signage, no gates. Just a rusted chain-link fence that leaned like it had given up long ago. But I remembered it. This was where Lunaris was born. Before the sleek headquarters, before the boardrooms and glass walls and designer furniture, before Mila's press kits and curated branding decks. Back when it was just a dream, and my mom, and 3 folding chairs in a prefab trailer with a leaky roof. And somehow, through all the mergers and restructures and legal maneuvers, she had held onto this land. The final clause in the trust listed it as a non-liquid legacy asset. But it was more than that. It was a reminder. The paperwork came through quickly. Harper handled most of it. Permits. Ownership filings. City Council fast-tracked the approval. Apparently no one objected to something labeled Community Green Space Initiative. They didn't need to know the whole story. Just that something needed to be made right. Construction began 3 weeks later. Quietly. No press. No ribbon cutting. Just a rotating crew of landscape architects, local volunteers, and one persistent retired botanist named Evan, who insisted native plants would heal the soil faster than any synthetic blend. He wasn't wrong. The cracked pavement came up first, revealing the dirt beneath, compacted but full of potential. Then came the trees. Magnolia, dogwood, red maple, each one planted with intention. Each root a declaration. This land still matters. We built walking paths that curved gently through the shade, benches with wide backs, a small water feature that echoed just loud enough to drown out the city traffic. The air changed. It smelled like memory, but also like hope. I came by most mornings before work. Sometimes just to sit, sometimes to plant, sometimes to breathe. No one knew it was mine. And that was the point. It wasn't a monument to me. It was a restoration of everything they tried to erase, and everything we were finally reclaiming. At the edge of the garden, we placed a single stone wall. Simple. Clean. Hand-laid. In its center, a bronze plaque. For the builders. The forgotten. The kind-hearted. In memory of Eleanor Blakand, the daughter she finally saw. I didn't cry when they mounted it. But I stood there for a long time, just listening. The city moved on behind me, horns, construction, the buzz of another deal being made somewhere I no longer needed to be. But in that moment, all I could hear was the rustle of leaves and the soft trickle of water. My mother had built something out of nothing. And now, so had I. Not for profit. Not for power. For peace. Peace doesn't announce itself. It arrives like morning light, soft, steady, unavoidable. In a world obsessed with noise, she had left me silence. A place to remember. A place to breathe. And finally, after years of being spoken over, sidelined, and scrubbed from the narrative, I had a space where I didn't need to prove anything. Not even to myself. It was a crisp Saturday in early October when we visited the cemetery. The garden had just entered its first true season. Leaves turned amber at the edges. The air smelled like pine needles and the slow fading of summer. My son, Ben, balanced a shoebox in his arms, careful not to tip it as we made our way up the stone path. The box was a project he'd spent a week on, a hand-painted model of the park. Tiny paper trees, a winding clay path, even a miniature bronze plaque he'd copied from memory. He wanted to show Grandma. The headstone stood where it always had. Simple, unadorned. My mother's name etched deep into smooth granite, the date of her birth still older than most of the buildings we'd rebuilt. Ben knelt down beside it, gently setting the box at the base. She would have liked it, he said, brushing dirt off his knees. I smiled softly. She does like it, I replied. She just sees it differently now. We sat there for a while. No phones, no distractions. Just the wind and the leaves and the slow, steady rhythm of grief finally settling into something gentler. He reached for my hand without speaking, and I let him hold it. It's strange the way the world teaches you that healing must be loud. That power must be loud. That anything worth noticing has to shine, shout, perform. But the last few months had shown me the opposite. Some of the most powerful things happen quietly. In signatures. In shared glances. In unread clauses tucked deep into legal archives. My mother didn't leave me a fortune. She didn't leave me a building with my name on it. She left me something harder to define but infinitely harder to take away. She left me clarity. About what matters. About how to move forward. About when to speak and when to simply stand. For years, I thought I needed someone else to name my worth. A title, a vote, a seat at the table. But maybe the real power isn't being given a seat. It's knowing you've already earned one, whether they acknowledge it or not. The garden, the company, even the fallout, it wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about recognition. Of the pain. Of the silence. Of the space I took up, even when they pretended I didn't. There's a lesson in that. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to burn things down to prove you were there. You just have to stay rooted. Steady. Whole. Because sometimes the people who dismiss you the loudest are just afraid of how quietly powerful you already are. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't the fortune you salvage, but the self you refuse to surrender. We stood together in silence for a while longer. Then Ben picked up the shoebox, tucked it under one arm, and started back toward the path. I followed behind him, one hand grazing the stone one last time. The wind rustled through the trees above us. Not loud, not urgent. Just enough to remind me. Some things don't need permission to grow back stronger. They just need room.